Welcome. We are going to talk today about responding to an AP Literature and Composition style prompt for question 3, or the open-ended prompt. This one comes from the AP in 2001, which you can find on their website. And you can see it's focusing on madness. Again, if you look at the bottom of the page here at video.metonymy.info, you're going to be able to get a link to the web page where you can find these. Okay? One definition of madness is mental delusion or the eccentric behavior arising from it. But Emily Dickinson wrote, "Much madness is divine as sense to a discerning eye." Now, this is kind of the background here. Here, we're going to work into the close background and the prompt itself. Novelists and playwrights have often seen madness with a discerning eye. Select a novel or play in which a character's apparent madness or irrational behavior plays an important role. Then, write a well-organized essay in which you explain what this delusion or eccentric behavior consists of and how it might be judged reasonable. Explain the significance of the madness of the work as a whole. Do not merely summarize the plot. Now, this last part, let's start at the end and work our way up. That is always there. Don't summarize. You need to understand what they're asking you to do. The point here is to respond to this bit of the prompt. Okay, we need to identify a character with this madness or irrational behavior and describe it, explain it, what the delusion or eccentric behavior consists of, and then how it might be judged reasonable. What is reasonable in this madness? This is going to have, I think, thematic implications. At the end of the day, that's what we're doing in the open-ended prompt. We're writing about thematic ideas. So the significance of the madness to the work as a whole, and I think the recent prompts really reflect this. What we're looking at here is theme. Okay? Main ideas. So, alright, well, obviously when we walk in the room, we're ready to write the question 3 response. We need to have a good raft of options from our year's reading and maybe reading we've done outside of class. So immediately I start thinking of characters, Ahab springs to mind from Moby Dick. I can't get around Vonnegut. I love Vonnegut, so I'm thinking of Billy Pilgrim from Slaughterhouse-Five. And of course, I think Kilgore Trout is a great example from that same book that we could certainly write about in some way. Slaughterhouse-Five, Moby Dick, madness. Oh my gosh, so many people. I'm thinking of Tommy possibly from Never Let Me Go. Not madness really, but nevertheless, his irrational behavior there. The other two, here these guys, I could see some madness, or maybe Pilgrim is more irrational, but that's arguable, of course. And Kurtz from Heart of Darkness, or the Harlequin character, the young man who I just have a soft spot for. Boy, lots to write about in Heart of Darkness on this one, I think. Okay, so I've got a few options immediately. Starting to think about this. The next thing I want to do is think about this. Okay, first of all, what is the delusion or eccentric behavior? And then how could it possibly be judged reasonable? So right away I want to think about madness, Ahab. It's his obsession, right? Obsession with the white whale. How is this reasonable? Well, certainly, the physical harm he feels and mental anguish has been visited on him by the whale. But gosh, right away, I automatically don't want to write about that. Of course, I also haven't read Moby Dick in the better part of 15 years, so I'm going to skip that one. Okay, let's see here. What about Pilgrim? Got the time traveling, the detachment, but the thing about that is it's reasonable because it's not actually madness. It's like we have to judge it as madness. I can't write about that. Tommy from Never Let Me Go has his emotional outbursts. He seems so irrational, you know. He overreacts all the time. And you know, especially in at the elementary school, or I guess at Hailsham, it just seems irrational. But of course, eventually we find out, and he has that outburst at the end of the book after they go to Miss Emily's. That really, I mean, why is this reasonable? Because he's a clone and he's having his organs harvested. He's brought up like a normal child within some realm of acceptability, but at the same time, I mean, he's destined all along. These people who are kind to him, who they don't show him love. That's going too far, but who raise him. I mean, at the end of the day, they're raising him for his organs. So I can understand the emotional outbursts. They're not irrational anymore. It's totally rational to have an emotional outburst in this case. Um, okay, let's think about Kurtz for a second. Well, you know, let's see here. How is Kurtz mad? He um, basically becomes a god to the natives in the Congo. He basically leaves the European norms behind. He is just, I mean, he's basically a shade. He's like he's a part man. He's not a whole human being anymore. He is so become so bizarre. This is reasonable because he has basically been consumed by the horrors of imperialism. This response, this bizarre godlike, he becomes a god to the natives. This is just the furthest extension of the propaganda, uh, of the pure idea of imperialism, the altruistic rationale, the rationale. He's there to help them. And so why not become a god? Yeah, that's it. That's what I want to write about. And I can think of an awful lot of details from the text to use. So I've got my idea. I really want to start writing, but just by way of example, I think what I'll do is quickly outline this so you can see how this might look as an essay. Okay, so what I've drawn here is what was described to me by one Mary Allen Ackerman as a chicken foot, and I love this planner. Here I'm going to write my thesis. Kurtz's madness exacts a horrible toll on the natives of the Congo. As he assumes a godlike position among them. But is reasonable in the context of the novel. As the purest extension, or maybe furthest extension, of the ideals underpinning European imperialism. Now that is a pretty heavy-duty thesis. Nevertheless, it sure sets me up to write about the text, I think. Alright, so let's see here. First thing I think we need to do is deal with the ideals, the white man's burden, this whole warped idea. he's got his pamphlet, it's called, that he gives to Marlowe, um, with its soaring rhetoric that ends in a hand-scrawled note that says "Exterminate the brutes." Like a lightning flash out of the sky or something, he says, I believe. Um, you know, this is the first idea I want to write about, right? So these are the ideals of the cultural, sort of context of the time. Not that everyone agreed with that, but that certainly was these are the ideals behind, or the propaganda maybe that was used to justify imperialism. Next, I want to talk about thinking of this quote that says, "All Europe contributed to the making of Kurtz." Oops. All Europe contributed to the making of Kurtz. He's half English, half French. Um, he's pure. He's a prodigy. Even his pamphlet mentions this idea that you can assume the godlike stance. I mentioned that, supernatural, I believe. So he really is he's like set up in the text as the purest imperialist, and this is one of the reasons why Marlowe is so interested to meet him. So I write about that, and then finally, I want to come back to this idea of how is this reasonable? It's reasonable because only if we see it as exposing the horrors of imperialism. This is imperialism to the nth degree. Imperialism's apex. What might look reasonable to some is in fact insanity. So then insanity is purely reasonable. When the status quo is insane. And Marlowe, I think, sees this. He says, "Well, what do you people know with your butcher shop and your, your policeman around the corner and these kind of things?" At the end of the day, they live in this world. He goes back to Europe, and Marlowe is so upset at the normalcy. He's really conflicted, but he sees all this normalcy, and he realizes is once he's seen this true heart of darkness, what happens as a result of this imperialism, that's it. There's no going back. And I think here we get to the theme, and that is, of course, what we are meant to walk away with as well. The narrator walks away with that in the very last paragraph of the text, how he sees into the heart of darkness. He sees because of this example of this insanity that is truly sane if you are imbued in the ideals of imperialism. So again, what's the point? The point is the ideals themselves are insane. Imperialism is insane. I've got it. I can write about this. I've addressed the prompt. I've got reasonable, madness, right? Certainly got a description. I have detail from the text. I have to know that detail to walk in there and be able to write about it. Otherwise, I'm going to be extremely vague. But I think this is a working response to this prompt. When we respond to the prompt, use this prompt language. We start by dissecting it. That's what I did. We make sure we use that language as we write about it. And then, this whole chart here is really just an example. I don't know that you have time for this. You have to sort of do that in your brain. Think, okay, who fits? Once you come up with that, this down and dirty plan is, I think, well worth the time. And then you're starting by writing about things that are specific. You're making sure you're writing about ideas. All of this relates back here to this thesis, and therefore I'm going to have a nice, tight, concise, powerful essay that relies on the actual details of the text. Okay, that's it. That's what we do. Use the link at the bottom of the page. Go to the AP website. Look up some of these Part 3 or Question 3 open-ended response questions, and try it out yourself. Check it this way. Look for the language here. I'm using madness. I'm using reasonable. Have I explained what this behavior is? Yes. Right? And then what's the significance of the work as a whole? Thematics. I've got all of that. You can just double check that. It's not that hard. Half of it is language. The ideas obviously can be a little harder to handle, but that's how you can get out there and learn on your own and practice. Good luck.